My name is David. And this is a little piece about King Murphy, and the hidden art of management. Alrighty. Here we go, Murphy, on the art of management. The story compels me to introduce you, the listener, to 3 words right from the outset. The first word is mediocrity. The second word is unrealistic. The third word is expectations. And these are words you will remember well the next time you have occasion to look around your organization and its incumbents. Now, here is our starter for 10. I would like you to consider very carefully my opening statement that problems are mainly incurred at the design stage of most projects and assignments, that is to say, they're inbuilt. And it rarely matters whether the venture was meticulously prepared before implementation or assembled ad hoc over a period of time. The end result is usually the same the world over, a glaring shortfall on the bottom line of the profit and loss sheet. This is invariably the case whether you know that you have a problem or not, or are being kept in the dark about it. If you have an ongoing problem with a product, process, system, or production line, then you may be interested in a distillation of a lifetime's experience of being in the thick of such difficulties. This experience has been gained through my involvement with well over 60 companies during those years, ranging from very large household names down to the very smallest and most insignificant of backstreet, owner-managed enterprises. I remember less than a quarter fondly and the majority with mind-numbing incredulity. The most telling memory is that the smaller the company, the less room for hiding errors, omissions, and incompetence. Larger companies will always have an edge here as backwaters, blind alleys, and scapegoats abound. Internal politics and gross incompetence do more long-term damage to companies than a Second World War air raid. If only the shareholders knew. I'm sure that I'm not telling you anything you don't already know when I say that people are the culprit. But not bad people. Bad people can be seen for what they are, and, hopefully, something will be done about them before it's too late. And not good people either. Oh yes, there are lots of good people out there, somewhere. No, the real company killers are unseen for what they actually are, insidiously lurking, waiting to suck the very life's blood out of the business. Most of these transgressors, I'm sure, will no doubt be very nice people, but deadly nonetheless for their normal predisposition. They occupy all professions and all walks of life. They are the mediocrity. Inoffensive individuals who, by one means or another, have attained positions of authority beyond their capacities, capabilities, comprehension, and effective technical merit. I haven't seen the company yet, where this effect is not present. In some businesses or professions it's marginal and loosely controlled to a greater or lesser degree. In others it's dramatically rampant and systemically unstoppable. And, I've actually made a living from this beast of mediocrity. I used to try to highlight its effect, to show its presence, but that was most unwelcome by all concerned. Eventually I accepted it like an old friend, it kept me busy. And absolute and total discretion became my watchword. In my earlier years I functioned as a design and development engineer, that's what I did. I designed and developed things for companies, self-propelled robotic manipulators for the Channel Tunnel being but one of my claims to fame. However, a lot of the time I was really nothing more than a Mr. Fix-It. Sorting out other people's problems, fixing shortcomings, and, generally shutting the stable door after the very expensive horse had bolted. Don't misunderstand me, I don't consider myself the best of the best. I'm simply very good at what I do, and I saw things, as an outsider, that eluded those who were, for obvious reasons, more emotionally involved. I saw into the hearts and minds and behavior of companies who regularly confused the battle with the battleground. They needed a game changer. Unfortunately, some companies, like some governments, will procrastinate and hemorrhage for years before deciding to stem the flow of lost and squandered revenue. And this is where I often came in. However, before I accepted an assignment, either to design from new, or to rectify an existing work, I urged the overseeing authority within that company to consider the central components of the following. When attempting to rectify problems or productivity deliverables, it's necessary to determine whether or not the costs of perceived rectification can be recovered by the expected productive capacity increase. This is where risk management is important. For example, do you risk spending any money in the hope of making good your perceived losses? Simple risk management mathematics will clearly show the way here. But remember, bullshit can, and often does, baffle brains. The three main reasons for product, process, system, or production line failures are: unrealistic management expectations, insufficient primary performance, and labor limitations. Labor limitations can usually be overcome quite simply, if not uneventfully. And this may well have a lot to do with inappropriately selected personnel, not their fault, management's fault. Insufficient primary performance can also be overcome in a somewhat like manner, if not as inexpensively. Shouting a bit louder though might not do the trick here. And we should all beware of mind guards. That's people who only tell you what they want you to know, not what you really should know. And, when the shit hits the fan, it rarely pays to rely on an explanation passed back up the line from the sharp end. It's invariably a protective device and often, in varying degrees, at odds with reality. However, unrealistic management expectations are areas where most of the pain will be experienced. Especially where variances and discrepancies are large or the productivity envelope is expensive in overall company terms, as indicated by departmental bottom lines. Here we are, unfortunately, dealing with presumed experiential knowledge and judgmental competencies. And at such a juncture reliance is invariably placed squarely upon the inherited problem syndrome, rightfully or wrongfully so. And phrases like, "It's nothing to do with me," and "It's always been like that," fail to quell the destructive potential within us all when we choose not to materialize a problem by solidifying it with a name. This is where I return to my opening statement that product, process, system, or production problems are mainly incurred at the design stage of most projects. Again, that is to say, they are inbuilt. I kid you not. As a design engineer, I like to think that I, arguably, looked for a balance between the best and the reasonable. And if we accept what has been said by the late and great, that the best is the enemy of the good, we are reminded that excellence invariably has a high front-end loading, via appropriate resourcing. Whereas the mediocre eventually creeps up on us with a high back-end loading through hindsight via perceived loss, because of realized shortcomings, and failures. A failure to perform in either the past, present or future, being the most insidious of mediocre's incompetences. Clearly, one may surmise, the only safe ground is in the middle. Except where unrealistic expectations are concerned, here there is no middle ground. Only a fool's errand. From an observational or investigatory point of view, discovering variances and deviations of expectancy, or even just plain old problems, within a complex production process or system, usually requires the investigator to move from the macroscopic to the microscopic. That is, firstly understand what is happening globally, secondly, understand what is happening elementally, and thirdly, overlay the insights against what is expected to happen definitively. Trying to keep all the balls in the air at once never was going to be easy, and knowing this is called, experience. However, from an internal managerial point of view, it is necessary to achieve a responsible outcome that satisfies the suitability, timeliness, and cost constraints of the company. Rarely does one necessity match the other. Something always has to be sacrificed. Corners may have to be regrettably cut. This shortfall is seldom conducive to attaining a satisfactory result. This is invariably why intentions, systems, and processes fail in the first place. Either because not enough, or the right sorts, of resources were employed from the outset, or, because what was implemented simply was incapable of fulfilling perceived expectations. Welcome to the universal mediocre. I'll say that again. Welcome to the universal mediocre. Incurring problems is easy, it requires only loose thinking and aberrational behavior. Rectification, on the other hand, often requires a different mental set and functionality much removed from the norm. And mediocre mentalities greatly disadvantage themselves and their objective. Rectification requires involvement and intent that is uncluttered by the dubious concerns of self-worth and position. Rectification also requires an unshakable faith in the need to identify how all systemic elements achieve functional cohesion and relevant justification. It requires the ability to selectively highlight elemental usefulness in practice. It requires perception and intuitive judgment, and an unwillingness to accept the distorted vision of others and their departure from objectivity. The systemic investigation of product, process, system, or production line problems requires that the observer maintain impartiality and an ability to distinguish between problem-solving needs and situational management objectives. Sometimes the chasm is mind-boggling. I'll also say that, again. Sometimes the chasm is mind-boggling. Here we must step boldly into the lion's den, because the real hobgoblin with productivity systems of any kind is that often, for often read nearly always, that the roles and behavioral aspects of the people in the system are actually, or have become, part and parcel of the problem itself. Sometimes simply overcoming precedental thought processes, and preferential maintenance of inappropriate ideas and methodologies, can have profound effects to the good. What can be extracted, by the investigator, from product, process, system, or production line problems, as solvable eventualities, depends upon how each participant sees their role in the scheme of things. And success is interdependent with what we perceive as relevant facts and how we conceive appropriate solutions. And, of course, how much the client is prepared to be supportively involved in the process. Sacking the brother-in-law, because his judgment and behavior is killing the company, can often be a real smart, if somewhat unwelcome, move. Having to pretend that twice as much work can be achieved in half the necessary time, because that's all management has budgeted for, is a normal activity in most companies that disgraces itself in a particular way, absolutely guaranteeing a predictable, if unprepared for, outcome. On too many occasions have I been told, don't bother looking at that, we don't have time, anyway it's been checked and okayed already. Only to find aberrationum inconceivable to the original perpetrators and their ilk. Checked out by whom, when, where, how, why? What was their motivation? Were they being objective, or were they working to a deadline or even, heaven forbid, a time and budgetary constrained hidden agenda? I keep 6 honest serving men, they taught me all I knew. Rudyard Kipling, check it out, it's better than a weapon. When asked by harangued and pilloried production managers, can you find the problem and fix it? I, in all honesty, have to reply, do you really want me to find the problem? And if I do you truly want me to fix it? Believe me, this is not as stupid as it sounds. After all, if I, an outsider, prove to be successful, where the people living with the problem have been unsuccessful, you draw your own conclusions here. As history clearly records, killing the messenger is a well-played game. On the odd and rare occasion that I was unsuccessful. Oh yes, it does happen, I'm not God for Christ's sake. The visible release of tension in the people around me was all too clear. They know the problem was unresolvable. After all, if it was fixable, then they would have fixed it long ago. Of course they would, surely they would, wouldn't they? It is a resounding and undeniable fact of life, that everyone, without exception, wants the quick fix, the shortcut, and the fast return. And, because of this, they're drawn to those who appear to be offering to relieve them of their worries and responsibilities, in the simplest, fastest, and most economical fashion. But, I repeat, but, wasn't that how the problem manifests itself in the first place? Then we hear the universal prayer. Oh. Come on now, of course you know what the universal prayer is. The universal prayer is, oh shit, don't let this happen, not now. See? I told you that you knew what the universal prayer is, didn't I? Well, is there ever a good time for a catastrophe? It's all down to cause and effect. Without the cause, the effect surely cannot manifest itself. And, using the same type of mentality, to remedy its own offspring, isn't a judicious use of anyone's resources. Now, it's often said that a good engineer can do for £1 what everyone else can do for £2. This is only a half-truth, and a deceiving one at that. It should go something like this. Good engineers cost more in the short term, because they design out long-term problems. And they do this via the modality of experience. Now, experience is something that young graduate engineers are 20 years away from possessing. This mental functionality cannot be taught, it has to be earned by rite of passage, and those obligatory crisis rites. This all takes time, and, for even a halfway fair beginning, the more time spent at the event horizon, that's the conception and design stage, the less time will be spent on callback, rectification, support, and fence mending. Unfortunately, as in most things, really, and I do mean, really good engineers, are thin on the ground. And the disheartening norm, now, is a mediocre, apathetic, half-hearted attempt to do for £1 that, which really should have been done for £2 in the first place. Oh. There's an echo in here, I can just feel it vibrating off the walls, falling upon deaf ears, so, again. A mediocre, apathetic, half-hearted attempt to do for £1 that, which really should have been done for £2 in the first place. But it doesn't stop there, because then there's the consequential loss of orders of magnitude of pounds worth of productivity, and, if it doesn't keep being swept under the carpet, the eventual cost of rectification, and, or, contractual obligation fulfillment. And we all understand what penalty clauses are, regardless of what they call them these days. Right first time isn't just pronounced lip service bullshit, it's presence of mind, practiced only by experienced personnel, who are not only watchful of immediate occurrences, but intensely mindful of the preceding presence of things to come. What a good engineer can do for £1, and what a mediocre engineer can do for £1, are worlds apart. And, out of every 10 engineers in a room, 7 of them will have cost their companies dearly, one way or another, and yet, will still be very nice people. A good engineer, therefore, is someone with extended vision, someone who can see into the fog down the road, comprehending what mere mortals cannot, and will think in the longer terms of, what if? What if, people, what if? A mediocre engineer, who is being pressured by an errant manager, might not give a damn one way or the other what happens to the bottom line in 6 months' time, he'll still get his mortgage paid regardless. Something that fits in quite well with present, do it quick and keep it cheap, ideologies. A clear mind may see that a mediocre engineer, plus a harassed manager in a hurry, equals the potential for something very nasty coming back to haunt the company later on. And the litigation machine just loves the thoughtless, leading the mindless, blindly on past the point of no return. But don't you worry about that, because the mediocre engineer, and his overstressed manager, probably haven't worried about it either. They have more immediate problems biting them. And the growing trend of future analysis of poorly orchestrated past events, either productive, contractual, or litigious, rarely seems to occur to anyone anymore. Not until sharp teeth penetrate the trousers, that is. To round off now, here's a little insightful story about time bombs that may or may not give you food for thought. If it doesn't, then, well, what can I say? Apart from, actual common sense is a precious and rare commodity, and there's absolutely nothing universally common about it, at all. Now we get to our story of Murphy, and his extremely intuitive insights into human nature. Ladies and gentlemen, King Murphy has entered the building, and is now in residence. I give you, Murphy, on the art of management. Please relax, and pay close attention as the magic unfolds, because so important are these insights, that they were originally laid down as a series of meaningfully explicit laws, and are worth their weight in gold. To give them their formal title, they're called Murphy's Laws. Now, it is said that, in the 6th century, an Irish king of great wisdom and observation, who also happened to be a student of human nature, recognized patterns of behavior in his appointed ministers of a consistently reoccurring nature. Now history, the great recaller, actually does have call to be very grateful to this man. Because, as it will be revealed, King Murphy was nobody's fool. And, just as importantly, neither were his ministers. It's a shame they weren't immortal. Alas, we still can't put an old head on young shoulders, can we? Anyway, King Murphy's ministers had all been carefully selected, on technical merit, by the big dog himself, for their positions in his team. They were not friends, or relatives, as so easily could have been the case. These men and women really knew, and could do, their jobs, within their particular, individual, skill sets. However, something didn't seem to be quite right, as problems from past activities kept drawing their attention away from affecting and fulfilling tasks in the present, and planning and coordinating for the future. This was now becoming more than a worry, as it was clearly inhibiting growth potential. In fact, it was starting to hurt badly. Clearly, King Murphy thought to himself, while sat contemplating on the throne one day, "'Tis a time of great mysteries." But, whatever was wrong, whatever was adrift, it had to be nipped in the bud, and quickly. Now, King Murphy, being a mindful and astute, hands-on, sort of managerial king, had, at the outset, replaced all of the yes-men, and doom and gloom merchants, as quickly as they had been spotted. And what was now left, was good, solid, working know-how. Direction and vision were supplied by the king himself, and he knew that a happy and well cared for kingdom, was a loyal, and successful kingdom. So something else was amiss. Something needed to be added or removed from the mix, but what? Came the Monday morning. The weekly meeting of Kingdom Inc. was to be the dawning of a fresh new age. King Murphy was ready, and waiting, for his troops. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said calmly. "I love you all very dearly. After all, it's you who keep me in the luxury I so richly deserve. So please listen to me with open minds, as I'm going to give each one of you a companion to help you in your work." At this, a ripple of indignant bewilderment passed not too silently through the room. "Relax," said old Merv, not being one to employ someone and then contest their management decisions. "Your companion will simply be a large sheet of paper. It is to be positioned, in your office, where you cannot fail to see it. Not all of you will need it all of the time. But it will be there, as a reminder, for the unwary." With this last remark, the king passed to each of his ministers their new working companion, keeping one back, for himself. "Because the buck stops with me," he said dryly. "I must have one as well." The king hung his on the throne, where he could not fail to see it. In large bright letters, it read: "Stop, look, listen. This is not going to be as easy as it looks. This will take longer than you think. This will cost more than you estimate. If anything can go wrong with this, it will. If anyone can successfully misunderstand you, they will, and then you'll be blamed. So, think twice, nay, think thrice. Then, when you're absolutely sure, do once, okay." King Murphy could see from the nodding heads, smiling faces, and twinkling eyes, that his fresh grasp of the situation wasn't falling on deaf ears and closed minds. And Kingdom Inc. would soon have its house in order, ready for a new, and uninterrupted, flow of business. The moral of the story is: if you don't understand the story, are you part and parcel of the ongoing and ever-present, universally ignored, problem. Just because life's a gamble, that does not mean we have to put gamblers in charge of everything. It means that we actually have to prepare our game plan to shorten, or attempt to remove, the odds of being taken to the cleaners, more often than not, by the mediocrity and unrealistic expectations of some of our own, good, nice, people. Trust me, friends and colleagues can be just as dangersome as our competitors or our enemies. And lots of undertakings can, and often do, suffer from the "not invented here" syndrome. Or have to run the gauntlet of closed minds, or, lesser capable, different agendered individuals. Pay attention now, here is the gold. Everything, yes everything, can be distilled down to one thing. And that thing is, what? Yes, you heard it right. It's what, the word is what. And, what, is a questioning word. Something that very few people actually know how to do in depth. Try these few simple sentences just to see how they feel as they issue forth from your mouth, or rattle around in your mind. What are you doing? What is the problem? What actually happened? What was actually said? What is the system? What are the requirements? What is the specification? What does the contract lock you into? What are you going to do about it? Those are just a few to help get you started. When you know the what of all things, you'll know what you should already have done, and, just as importantly, you'll know what to do next. And, you'll also know what not to do in the future. I certainly don't have God-like powers and I could never overcome what didn't want to be overcome, be it mediocre, unresourceful, unresponsive people, poorly constructed systems and processes, or unrealistic and unattainable expectations. In life we can't cater for every eventuality. In business all you need concentrate on is, the what of it. If you have a problem, do not allow yourself to be diverted from the seriousness of the task at hand by harboring unrealistic and untenable expectations from the outset. There is great responsibility in making known the simple from the complex, and attempting to resolve problematic situations characterized by uncertainty, disorder and indeterminacy. So firstly you will need to get a firm grip on the situation. Easier said than done, do I hear you say? Well, maybe you should ask yourself what business you're actually in. It may turn out that, perhaps, you're in the wrong business to begin with, or, you're just simply not suited to the unfolding game, as she is being played. Problematic situations require definition and analysis. The opening gambit is the discovery stage, which requires factual characterization including peripheral situation appraisal and climate identification. Beginning with what is happening right under your nose, right now, at this instant. This is followed by dimensional identification and objective clarification. An important aspect here is the assessment of the strengths and weaknesses of the presiding authority in being a party in aid of solving their own problems. In lots of instances the presiding authority is both problem manifester and problem maintainer, usually having committed themselves prior to establishing the financial veracity and viability of the venture. Especially in light of the endeavor coming unglued and responding with, oops. And the last stage is, if at all possible, rectification. All of this is a time and cost incursion that could, nay, should, have been designed out of the loop at the outset. However, such is life. On the subject of unrealistic expectations I leave you with this thought. Nothing is impossible for the person who doesn't have to do it themselves. Remember now, that, while the best is the enemy of the good, the mediocre is everyone's enemy. And sometimes, it really can prove to be far more financially viable, not to do something at all, rather than to do it badly, from day one, with mediocre personnel and, or, unrealistic expectations. Thank you for your time, believe me. I do know how valuable it is. But do you know how expensive it is? Really?